We will also delighted to welcome Ben to today's Chewing the Cud session, to tell us a little bit more about his work at Finch Foundry and to think about the topic of working collections. So welcome, Ben.
Hello. Sorry, I'm a bit new to hosting meetings, so hopefully I'm doing everything correctly. Tell me if I'm not. So my name's Ben. I've been at Finch Foundry for 11 years now. I'm the Senior Collections and House Officer, which is sort of a site supervisor kind of role, and I'm involved in a bit of everything, really. Something that's really interested me over the years is the maintenance and repair of the machinery we run at Finch. So I was sort of going to talk a bit about that. So I'm going to go into a bit of an overview of what the point of my talk is really, and take some questions at the end. So I'm going to give a bit of introduction and go from there. So obviously I work at Finch Foundry. It was once a water-powered hammer mill, a blacksmith shop, a general village purveyor of all sorts of different things. As time went on, they've lasted till 1960. They needed to do quite a lot to survive. It was reconstructed as a museum by members of the family during the 60s and 70s and reopened as a museum around early 1970s, but was open on and off in that time as well. Today it's a small National Trust property, situated on the northern edge of Dartmoor near Oakhampton in Devon. At Finch, we run guided tours 5 to 7 days a week, and as part of the tour, when in operation, we run our Victoria machinery. It consists of 3 water wheels running hammers, shears, a fan system for the forges and sharpening stone. Just going to give you an idea. So these are the hammers in the photograph and the shears there. There's me doing a tour. And that's Andy, our ex-blacksmith. He used to help us out too. So we had a bit of ongoing in the background as well on one of our large water wheels. So we've suffered from lack of operation over the years due to many setbacks. Some are small, some were large, some were temporary, some felt a bit more permanent. But due to the attitude that the machine provides a unique experience, helps people understand the place as well as the operating collection of the mill, we keep it maintained and running to the best of our ability. This is an ever-changing environment for us. But things seem to be getting better and better as time's gone by. We have suffered in the past from sort of a bit of lack of interest from lots of different people, but it seems to be getting better recently. The issue we're focusing on today is about the restoration and maintenance of the working historical machinery, although the issue can perhaps be extended to smaller working objects too. I'm going to ask, is it ethical to continue to restore working machinery so it keeps working, even to the extent that it means eventually replacing all the components until nothing original remains? Does the public benefit of seeing a machine work outweigh the authenticity of the object as well? If we are able to follow the Museums Association standard, I would suggest that following ethical guidance applies here, in that we should be presenting an accurate and honest representation of the object, be clear about repairs and maintenance and not cover up any changes. We need to support the freedom of speech and debate and accept others' opinions on what we're doing and consider them when making decisions, recording all changes and consulting known experts. We must remember that the collection is for public benefit, for learning, inspiration and enjoyment. This is a historic asset and should be treated with care and attention, with repairs being performed by experts, and be transparent about all aspects of the object while maintaining it for the future. At Finch, we follow industry standards. Originally, we've consulted the Museum and Galleries Commission's standards on the museum care of larger working objects. Then the Collection Trust's document on larger working objects. We've in recent years fed into the development of the Association of British Transport and Engineering Museums guidelines for the care of larger working historic objects too. We have developed a conservation management plan, defined components which have a limited lifespan, such as bearings, and agreed on a plan for maintenance renewal. Using original methods or already possessed spare parts where possible. We've also researched the methodology which the original owner used to stay true to the spirit of the machine, which was put together from spare and second-hand parts, so following their original path. We have an inspection process and record any changes, conservation repairs on reports. We're replacing, e.g., like when replacing a broken spur wheel parts. So I managed to break the spur wheel once, long story. We used a local foundry to cast new parts and sprayed them with iron oxide, so they're easily identifiable and record. And when we recorded all the processes, wrote it down, recorded that for the future. The parts were previously replaced in the 90s, and that's only recently been recorded, even though it was known that it happened by a few individuals. It wasn't clear that they weren't original to many people. The conservation management plan has also given us operating guidelines written by a water wheels and mills expert, which tells us how the machinery should be operated for optimum efficiency and longevity. From this, an operating manual has been produced for staff and volunteers to adhere to, alongside annual training, which is signed off and regularly reviewed depending on issues arising. So each year at our pre-season meeting with our volunteers, we test people, but we stopped being a bit more so intense and so formal about it. And we've started to do it a little bit more informally, one-on-one, because a lot of volunteers didn't like that at all. And I didn't like being watched too much too, but we're getting there with that as well and developing it as we go. At Finch, we're the only one really of our sort in the area. There are lots of other hammer mills across Europe and the world, but they're all a bit different and they're all operated differently. So there's been debate from lots of different people, including our curators, whether to keep it static as a museum piece, to continue running it, or reduce the running. Each have been considered, and we're starting to reduce wear through slow running on low impact settings, so we can move the hammer backwards and forwards if it's high or low, and less often as advised by experts who have the experience of similar objects. So we just ask, and where we find someone who knows what they're doing, we ask them to. We maintain parts where possible and replace components only when absolutely necessary. Consumable parts are replaced with new and originals preserved, i.e. the spur wheel. We continue to work the machinery as it continues tradition. It gives insight to visitors. It attracts a wide range of visitors from different backgrounds. It gives us wide engagement. It's inspiring. I think it's really hard to explain the feeling of a working object unless it's actually working. So it gives sensory engagement too, and that really reflects on our visitors. We have all sorts of different people come around, and it appeals to so many different people. We stopped conveying myths and become more transparent. In the past, we had a book of information written by Bob, who's the original man who set up the museum, and his research was obviously very limited at the time because he had to travel to read the research. And nowadays we've got the internet, and it's much easier to get a better insight into what really happened. And a lot of the volunteers made up stories in the past too. So we want to stop that happening, and some of the employees too. We've moved away from the idea it's a gentleman's plaything and engage with organisations and individuals who can help us interpret and stick to the guidelines to be as ethical as possible. And we're helping to push the importance of industrial heritage, which is behind the times, has only really been deemed important in the last 40 years. I'd like to quickly touch upon some of the issues we've hit. Lack of experts, lack of mill rights, lack of interest and support from the parent organisation, and funding as well, and also wavering public interest and relevance. It comes and goes. The issue, I think, is more important than ever because there are now more focus on industrial heritage sites, thanks to media interest, perhaps fueled by television series such as Peaky Blinders, which was obviously at Backcountry Living Museum, Poldark for the Cornish heritage landscape, and even the Great Pottery Throwdown and the Repair Shop to an extent, because people want to see how things are done. It promotes the diversity of the sector, creating more opportunities to engage. It promotes STEM with children and young people, and it also fits into the public interest in climate change, and it highlights the fact that green solutions existed a long time ago, creating inspiration and education, hopefully, for our visitors. I believe it's really important to convey our industrial heritage now more than ever, as it creates connections with the past of the 99%. The majority of the National Trust historic sites show the history of the rich and famous, basically the 1% and even the 0.5%, and are not really concurrent with the realities of the periods which they detail. That can cause distancing between them and the local community, and they cannot see themselves in the stories. Being able to relate is really important when making connections. So that's a little bit about running historic machinery. Please feel free to share your experience and opinions and ask me any questions you have. So that's that. Cool.
Fascinating, Ben. Thank you so much. I think there's a lot there to sort of unpick. I don't know if anyone has any initial thoughts that came out of that. George, yeah.
Yeah, well, something I've thought about for a very long time, and often sort of thought, at what stage, when we talking about using museum objects, because of maintenance, everything, at what stage have we built a replica?
Yeah.
But I've always say I only know of a couple of actual original objects in museums that I could put my hand on my heart to say is actually original. One's a DeLorean sports car in Northern Ireland, and that was a prototype model. So how original that is, I don't know. The other was a 3-furrow plough that came straight off the Ransoms line in Ipswich at the Museum of East Anglian Life, as it then was. Never used, so no parts have been changed or repaired. But there is a sort of the ethical, is it ethical concept of what are we preserving, what are we showing, and every machine that's ever been used has been maintained. And to be honest, if you mothballed the Finch Foundry, it'll probably degrade quicker than if you're using it. And I'm speaking as a conservator. But it is a very difficult thing to do, because consider, because we want to preserve the objects, but at the same time we're preserving the technology, the skills, and everything surrounding it. And it's quite a conundrum, I think, for the whole heritage sector to be thinking of. And I've been thinking about this recently. I'm actually sort of about to start trying to write something on big objects, because there's huge objects in store which museums can't do anything about, can't show, but they've collected them, they're in store, and you have to start thinking, well, why have we got them? But I feel that the Finch Foundry, you should be maintaining, you should continue to use them, because this is a whole story to tell, and the only way you can tell it is by running things, and it depends on you, on how hard you run it.
Yeah,
that's my 2 pence, but anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ben.
Yeah, it's absolutely. It's sort of, it's been quite hard over the last 10 years, sort of talking people into believing that they need to just not. It's the big Fox display. It's just like, wow, boom, gone. And a lot of people, did feel that way. I think let's just go for it and see what happens. But yeah, I think we're sort of getting there, especially with the team that we've got now. It's sort of quite a hard path, and it's been really hard at times, but yeah, it's getting easier as time goes by. I'm talking the managers into believing that it's worthwhile as well. That's tough, yeah, but as I get more experience, it's getting easier, luckily.
I like you're in a good place. Steve, I saw you nodding along to.
Yeah, I agree with what both of them have said. One of the things to consider is actually, as I think George and Ben said, was about what you're trying to show. It's not just about a thing working, because you could always make a model or a diagram or something online that shows how something works. But very often it's the noise, the sounds, and everything else that goes with it, the smells. And if you think of something simple like a steam train, there's lots in the National Museum that are just dead and sit there. You see the beauty of it, but you don't know how it works or what it sounds like. When you go to heritage railways, you see how they're working, and all of them have replacement boiler pipes and bits and pieces, unless they're beyond help, in which case they're just a picture thing. So I think it is good to have them working and to maintain them as they were before. And I think Ben raised the problem that is having that expertise to make your new foundry parts or diagnose a problem. So how do you get around that?
Well, I've had a lot of interesting conversations recently with millwrights. We use a millwright. Sometimes we use, oh gosh, Dorothea Restorations up in Bristol, and we've used other people too. And I spoke to their millwright. I said, "Oh, how are you going to pass your how you pass it on, because obviously Spav said we were running out of mill rights, and he said, well, you know, I just recommend you just qualify yourself as an engineer and just go and do it yourself. I was like, oh, okay. Rather than sharing the individual, like, I really need some key information about Finch for the future so I can write it down, and he just wasn't willing to share it either. So it's the difficulty. It's a real, frustrating, really. But yeah, I'm not sure how in the future we might do that. But I do know a lot of younger people are getting involved in STEAM in particular. So I'm hoping that it does continue to be maintained and it just carry on into the future. But you can't guarantee anything. No.
Thank you.
Christy.
Hi, Ben.
Hello.
I just think it's important with some of these items to remember that, you know, the history doesn't stop, and this is still their history. You know, in another 100 years' time, what Ben's doing now at Finch will actually be part of the history of Finch. And I just feel that as long as you, like you said, do good, honest, clean repairs that are well documented and are part of the objects or the machinery's story, then I think these things should be allowed to carry on as long as possible. I've got a situation which I have mentioned to Ben. We've got a water wheel at our museum in Oakhampton, which hasn't been used for many, many years. It was brought to the museum. It was never part of the building itself. It's at the stage now where it's not safe. So I would like to get it repaired. But we're also thinking that we would like to maybe generate electricity from it. And so obviously we're going to give it a new purpose, and I would just be interested to know what everybody's feelings were on that, really. If we did manage to do that, do you think that's something that we should use, you know, an historic water wheel for?
Can I just say it's now out of context anyway?
Yeah.
And for its original purpose was a grinding corn. I don't know what sort of mill it's from.
Yeah, I believe so. It was from one of the mills that were flooded at Rodeford Reservoir. So when they built that, they flooded a load of farms, and it was airlifted from the reservoir and dropped at our museum by a helicopter, apparently. So it's been there for quite a while, but it's actually, I think it's dangerous now, and I think we do get young people messing around on it at night time when there's nobody there, and I'm worried that somebody's going to get injured. So I need to do something with it, and it just seems to be an opportunity there for, obviously, for many good reasons. If we can, you know, as a learning example to our visitors and maybe local school children as well, it'd be a great example.
Actually, it sort of occurs to me that as an exhibit, you know, as just a straight piece of, I don't know, wood and metal, it doesn't say anything. But if you use it to generate electricity, you're actually given the story of it produced power. It produced the power to run a mill.
Yeah.
So if you use it to create electricity, you're producing power again. You're making the purpose and demonstrating the purpose, if you like.
Absolutely.
I think you can make an argument for doing that. Yeah.
So we are an actual mill. So that's you know, even though it won't, it doesn't. It's not. You know, our mill was never a water mill. So that's interesting. Thank you for your thoughts on that. But as Ben was saying, and he's mentioned to me, it's actually quite hard to find the mill rights now, that especially locally, that might be able to come and help us.
There are a few that I know of, and I think there's a few that I would avoid like the plague.
All right.
Did I say that out loud?
Just don't name names on the record.
I'm not going to name names.
I think maybe you could drop me an email, George, and just let me know who I should avoid.
I'll drop you. I'll find out some names for you.
Oh, that would be fabulous. Thank you.
And see
Ben
if I
sent
can.
me a few, which I'm grateful for, but that would be
Yeah.
great if you've got any others. That'd be really
Yeah.
useful. Thank you,
Yeah.
George.
I guess it is about kind of knowing that you're doing the right thing. So working with the right people to make those decisions. Do you think it's easier if, so I'm guessing in both situations, sort of the objects themselves have already undergone change over the years, they've been modified, they've been altered. I'm thinking of George's example of that ransom plough that is straight off the factory line, which kind of almost doesn't have as many stories because it's perfect. It's never been modified by the farmer because actually it works a bit better if you bend that bit of metal out a little bit more or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if it's already been used and developed, does that make it easier to sort of see that as a continuation? I'm just wondering, Lisa's not on the call, so we can't ask what the Food Museum would do with their perfect Ransom's plough, but actually that has a separate story to tell, whereas this is an ever-evolving working object. It's got a working life, and this is the continuation of its working life.
Yeah. Well, I think in a museum context or heritage context, you've also got the option of telling the story and interpreting and putting it into a context. So, around that water wheel, and you can use it to generate electricity. So, it's producing power, blah, blah, blah. But you can also give the story of its original purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think part of especially with the things like that, it's a static thing doesn't convey the power, and the smells and the things that go with it, which in a way is part of the story, as I see it. So, there's a lot you can do with it, I suppose, but I don't think it's unethical to, if you're going to do more or less a restoration rather than a conservation, you could call it preservation if you like. You can give a wider story to it as well, which is part of our job, isn't it? Isn't it part of the job to?
It's all about storytelling. That's true.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for your input, and watch this space. I may be back to all of you for more information.
Let us know on Jiskmail how you're getting on. We've talked about big objects. I wondered if there's anyone on the call who I'm thinking Sally knows Gresnell Farm and Workhouse quite well. We've got there both museum collections and we've got working collections, and we sort of sometimes have that distinction between the two, particularly on our farm. But we also have within the museum collections a number of items that do work, such as our Norfolk's oldest working car, which is an accessioned object. We've got boilers and steam-driven engines there as well, sort of thing. So I'm kind of thinking that with smaller items, is there that opportunity of double collecting? Then you have the storage issues. If you have got items that are being conserved and items that are being used for working, I don't know if that's another thing that anyone on the call's experience of.
Hi, sorry, I'm having camera issues today, but we have a little bit of experience of that at Chiltern Open Air Museum. But it's actually more that the double collecting was already done.
Okay, yeah.
So it's I've started to split the collection into, this is what is here to be saved, this is what's here to demonstrate. So we will always have at least one that is then available to be seen and preserved for the future. But then, so we have this working collection that we already had, that we can use in our education program as part of handling collections, or as you said, with our farm team, they can then use it to demonstrate traditional methods. But for the most part, that collecting, we'd already done it. And it's just been splitting the collection and in a useful way. So
Kaylee, when you say you'd already done it, had you set out as item A is the one to keep and item B, or do you just got two of those?
We just got two of those quite regularly, or quite often more than two of
lots of
those.
spares.
Yes. So because we're an open air museum, so we historically had a buildings manager, and we were very good at taking care of our buildings. But initially we collected objects as prop pieces. And it's only in more recent years that we've suddenly gone, oh, actually, we should be curating those as a museum collection as well, because they are museum objects. And that's where my position came into it as a collections manager. And it's then just been kind of starting from scratch and having a look at how we preserve, what we demonstrate, how we display. So it's led to some strange collecting, doing it that way, but it's led to quite a diverse collection that we can then use in different ways.
Do you find it challenging to make that decision as to where items then sit within those collections, or
it can
be the ones with the better provenance or the better state of repair? Or
that's what I've been trying to, when we have that data, we've been able to use it to then say, right, this is the one that should be saved because it's got the really interesting story attached to it. This is just a thing that came from somewhere. That's the one that we can use. But alternatively as well, it's just been kind of looking at, as you said, what's in good repair. My biggest issue has actually been changing the culture. Where, as I said, we have a history of the buildings very well preserved, but the objects were prop pieces. So trying to say, no, you can touch and use that one, but you can't touch and use this one, has been the biggest sort of stumbling block with our both staff and volunteers. But yeah, big cultural change.
And are you still on that journey by the sounds of it? It's sort of
definitely
starting out. Yeah. Fantastic. It sounds interesting again, and I think that's probably something that's we're seeing in a number of museums taking that thing. Sorry.
Hi, it's Zoe here from Avonscroft Museum. Just going back to your earlier sort of point of smaller things as well as buildings. I think it kind of, there's a whole spectrum, isn't there? So there's what Kaylee's been saying about just distinguishing between things for use and things for preservation. But I wonder, you've got your pristine ploughshare, which is almost like your toy still in its box, and actually the value is there in it not being used, because it's very rare to find one that's not used. And then your ploughshare that's had all the dinks and whatnot put into it as a working item, telling its own story. If you are using something, whether it's a ploughshare or a piece of machinery or a building like the windmill that we're currently working on, it's getting the balance right between having it in use where it tells many more stories and is much more kind of evocative and real and alive, versus conservation. So we've been advised, if we were to use our windmill to actually try and generate enough flour to pay for it, it's too old for that. It can't do commercial work, but we'd like to use it. And then the other side of that is some machines, some bits of machinery need to be run to be kept going. So a static piece, yes, you could have a pristine piece that you say that's for collection and others are for working use. But if you're wanting to keep some machinery alive of whatever size, if you just preserve it and don't have it working, it will degrade. That becomes a choice that it will degrade and will not be usable in future.
Yeah, this is something I've always said, that even gentle use of a machine will help to preserve it, for a number of reasons. I think one of the things that we often overlook, or people sometimes overlook, if you've got a static, let's say, combine harvester, okay, different from a mill, but you've got a static combine harvester, it's going to degrade whatever you try and do. And don't forget, it will degrade from the inside as well as the outside. we forget about the inside quite often. If you're running, if you've got machinery and you leave it static, it can seize up, and there's no impetus, if you like, for staff to actually regularly look at it. So it can quietly degrade in the corner. People come and see, sort of, and say it can degrade quicker with negligence rather than actual gentle use, or you might not be able to generate enough flour from your mill for to pay for whatever you want to pay for, but if you gently run that mill, at least it's go away. Sorry, they'll have to wait. At least you're sort of keeping the bearings going. Somebody's greasing it up. Somebody is actually actively looking after it. And so the problem has been in the past, and have to sort of almost denigrate the whole conservation profession in the past. It was the conservatives said, no, you can't do that, you can't use it, you can't damage it, but you could damage it more by not using it. And fortunately conservation has changed and moved on from that mindset. So I think you'll do well to occasionally run it gently, don't sort of push it to its limits, but a gentle bit of grinding or just putting is it a watermill or a windmill? I can't remember. At Avens.
We've got a windmill at Avenscroft. We've also got the bits of a watermill, which we're just discovering about. But we're a long way off doing anything with that.
Well, the trouble with a watermill is you need water, you need a pond, sort of.
We're on the way to getting it. It hasn't sailed for a few years now, but we've tried some basic maintenance. We're doing some repairs on it, but I guess the point I was making is absolutely violently agreeing with you, George. That we're aware there's some more fundamental repairs that we're making at the moment. We want to get it sailing again, but we're also aware that because it hasn't sailed, we may discover more problems getting it going again.
Yes.
And also it's this kind of honest use, and again, are we preserving something as it was reconstructed here, which again is not, so it's not in its original place either, or even the original structure entirely, or do we want it as a working part of the collection, not to overwork because we don't want to wear it out, but as part of honest working use? There would be honest repairs made on a almost daily basis by the miller. So
and I think these repairs that everybody that have been made and might have to make in the future also tell a story. I think I know the mill actually. I've got
Danzy Green Mill, if you want to look at it.
I think so. I think I've been there. The old brain sort of
You're making connection.
Sort of. Have I been there?
Have you worked on that one, George?
No, I haven't worked on it, honestly. I don't think I've worked on that one.
One mill ends up looking like any other.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned sort of low running, slow running, running maybe shorter hours or anything. Do you have anything for visitors who come when the hammer mill isn't operating? Is there something? It's not the same because you won't get exactly the same sounds and echoes or smells or anything, but I don't know whether you'd filmed it working, meaning that when it is in a downtime you can explain why it perhaps might not be in use. Or
we do. I mean, it still sort of a bit smells oily and things, and people love that because it reminds them of Grandpa's garage and things, which usually helps. But we switched. So during COVID we switched to guided tours. because of COVID, basically, to limit numbers. And then our visitor experience score, as we call it, went up 20%. And we've won a national award for customer service recently and things like this. So it obviously worked. That's pretty good. Like the guided tour helps a lot, because before we just demonstrated the machinery and then people wouldn't come.
Yeah.
But now they'd come for the tour, and then we tell them about the machinery, and we really do need, we just got an iPad, which is nice, which is a Galaxy tablet or whatever. So now we can show people the actual film, because there's loads of films on YouTube of me and everyone else running the machinery. So it's quite nice to have that. So we're
And probably actually you see some things on film that you, health and safety wise, wouldn't be able to get quite as close if you were in a group booking or something. Is that fair to say? Or
yeah, definitely. And yeah, and I think that's really great, because we're going to do a special film for it, just do a film for it, for the pad, so people can look at it. And we have it on TV. We've got a big TV as well. We don't really use as much as we could. So yeah, I think it'd be really great to have that, and also for people who can't get down into the forge, because it's so inaccessible. We've got to hopefully get some money to sort that out soon, but it's going to cost us £100,000 to get people into the forge who can't currently get into the forge, and lots of changes potentially to the building, which was modified in the 70s. But yeah, we're going to get there. And I was also thinking about smaller objects and how we've got a lot of tools, because they used to make tools, and it'd be quite nice to have film of those tools being used, so people can understand their usage a little bit better. Because I can't go out into a field and do some scything. I can't scythe anyway, but I go out into the field and do some scything every time I want someone to see a scythe in action. But I think it'd be quite good to have film of all those objects being used, but I just can't find really good film of a lot of things being used that we have, because we have some really odd tools as well. Yeah.
and you're probably then back to your issue with the millwrights of, you know, finding someone who knows how to use that rather odd tool as well. So
Yeah.
it's an ongoing challenge. But does anyone else have anything they'd like to add into the discussions, or anything that sort of sparked something in their thing? If not, I will call us to a close, and to thank Ben again for his time and his inspiration today, because I think that's taken us off in lots of different places, and really great to hear from you all as well. Like, you know, to share your experiences of working with working collections and those sort of decision making that is obviously a part of your everyday life, but great to sort of see that those connections can be made. Do keep using the Gistmail Royal Museums Network email discussion group to keep this going. So if there's anything that you think might be of use to those on the call, then please do share some links and the like. Another shameless plug to end with, just to say our next Chewing the Cud session is on Wednesday, the 23rd of October, when we'll be joined by some of my colleagues at Gresson Hall Farm and Workhouse to look at the Gresson Hall Environmental Hub, which is how we're using our rural life collections and our site at Gresson Hall in Norfolk to engage with visitors about the environment. So looking at our outreach programs, our schools visits, our exhibitions, our events and the like, but with environmental learning at its heart, and making the most of our 50-acre site in Norfolk. So hopefully you can join us for that. Hopefully you can also join us for one of our forthcoming seminars, and I've popped a note in the chat with the link to the Royal Museums Network website for that. So we'll see you at one of those, or we'll chat remotely via the Gistmail. And huge thanks again to Ben, and thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.